Really humbling on behalf of the Los Angeles City Fire Department to have this award for all the hardworking men and women. Needless to say, it has been a very, very difficult year for us. We did everything we could to the best of our ability. It's been also traumatic, and so much of wildfires are environmentally wind driven, and so it's so important to have people come together and celebrate the storytellers and to have discussions about the environment, about the increase of wildfires in severity and duration and frequency that we're seeing. And so we're really honored to be a small role of all first responders and to accept this award.
We'll do it live. Okay. We'll do it live. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Thing sucks.
Welcome, everybody. What day is it? It's Monday, December 15th. Man, we are getting close to Christmas. The drama is just getting higher and higher. Guys, is there an LAFD captain who's cashing in on the Palisades Fire? Is that even appropriate? Are EVs causing permanent damage to firefighters? I think you guys might already know the answer to this one. Is CalFire defrauding taxpayers? This is a topic that we've covered before, but I don't think we've covered it this extensively. And guys, it's really bad. It's even worse than what we've talked about in the past. We've got mainstream media is finally covering some of the issues with the state, including the leaked text messages, or I should say the text messages that were compelled to be released by the court, and the great work of Alexander the Great Robertson, the attorney prosecuting or fighting for the plaintiffs in the master case for the Palisades Fire victims. But they're totally missing the point. So this is why we have to do it live, guys, because when we let the news media do it live, they screw it up. And I'm going to point out how they do that. We've got some other, cultural stuff that we got to talk about. Obviously, there's been some really tragic news lately, and we got to address it. Okay. And we're going to do that. Daniel Firecopter, hello. KCK, hi. Super Pav, first live stream in months for me, back from Europe and on American time. You shouldn't have said that. Super Pav, you just admitted that you've not been watching our live streams. I'm super disappointed in you. I'm super Pav disappointed in you. Now, guys, this is going to be a really girthy stream. Okay, this is going to be very stout. Do it live, because this is what happens when we don't do it live every night. There's stuff that we got to get caught up on. But what we're going to do is I want to address something. We're going to address the elephant in the room. Rob Reiner died in a really horrific way. I don't even know how to describe what I'm feeling other than just tremendous shock and grief and sadness. And the president decided in his wisdom to post something that I thought was really atrocious and really inappropriate. And I'm really having a hard time wrapping my mind around it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but at the same time, it segues into a story that I think is important to share that I haven't shared from a few months ago when I was in Washington, D.C. with Spencer. And I will share it with you guys at the end. I'm not going to make you go through that now, but if you make it through to the end of the stream, I'm going to share something it's related, and it was really dark. And when I did my first stream after we left DC, I kind of had a hard time keeping it together. So I think now is maybe a good time to relay that story. But speaking of tweets that maybe people regret putting out there, Eric Scott. Okay, this is our lead story tonight. PIO Eric Scott. So he's writing a memoir. He's written a memoir, or maybe AI wrote the memoir. Calm amidst chaos. This book is dedicated to the 12 individuals who lost their lives in the Palisades Fire. It is also dedicated to the countless residents whose lives were forever changed. You can count the residents, okay? You can count them. It's not countless. It's a lot. Whose lives were forever changed. To the outstanding work of the hashtag firefighters and first responders who faced unprecedented conditions. And to all the untold stories of bravery and resilience that may never fully be known. Now, PIO Eric Scott, you saw in that video earlier, he's really been enjoying the limelight after the worst calamity in the history of the Los Angeles Fire Department. For some reason, they're getting stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's going to awards shows. He's at red carpet dinners. He's really enjoying it. While peasants like Spencer Pratt are trying to do podcasts in the rubble of their burned down home that never should have burned down in the first place. Now, keep in mind, the Los Angeles Fire Department, they were the responding agency to the 8-acre brush fire that they allowed to rekindle because they left it smoldering. And these guys are out there doing a fucking victory lap. But beyond that, we now have the PIO, who, when the ATF finally publicly declared that this fire was a rekindle of the fire that they walked away from, he went dead silent. He had a few tweets where he posted about, just how deep the roots go in the chaparral. Obviously implying like, there's nothing we could have done. That thing was just burning 25 feet underground. But then he didn't tweet a damn thing for like 2 weeks. 2 weeks. The last thing that he had tweeted was about the Dodgers winning the World Series. This is like unacceptable behavior from a public information officer. Like absolutely unacceptable. But he didn't care. He didn't care. He didn't care about actual public information. And now he's writing a memoir and he's going to sell it. I think it's $6.99 on Kindle. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about a PIO profiting off of the worst calamity in the history of the Los Angeles Fire Department? It's not as though they were the heroes. Right now, there is so much scrutiny and disdain for this agency because, first off, they allowed the Lockman fire to rekindle. They did a terrible job mopping the thing up, and then they walked away from it and it rekindled and destroyed the entire neighborhood. Now, anyone who's done fire training knows that a rekindle is like the ultimate scarlet letter for you as a firefighter. If you do not mop up a fire properly and it rekindles and, God forbid, destroys somebody's home, let alone 7,000 homes and kills 12 people, you have the permanent dunce cap on your head for the rest of your life. To watch these guys doing a victory lap when they should be stitching that dunce cap on their head for the rest of their lives and going to every single property, every weekend, they should be out there volunteering to scrape away rubble with a shovel. Hey, can I go to Home Depot and get some lumber and reframe your house for you? What can I do? What can I do? I let you down. But no, they're writing memoirs and they're going to profit off of it. The lack of self-awareness from this agency, I've said repeatedly, they need to address this. They need to address the elephant of the room. Continuing to ignore the rekindle, continuing to ignore all their failures is going to lead to people throwing their fucking Starbucks at them. Like, that is about to happen. I don't think Eric Scott quite understands just how pissed the Palisades residents are. And for all of you dorks who are out there saying, there's nothing they could do, there's nothing they could do, and yeah, people get angry. I remember getting angry when this such and such fire moved through our place. I remember hearing, I'm not going to name this person, but I remember them trying to scold people for being angry about this fire. Guys, how many times have I said it? You don't see me like crashing out over the Eaton fire. Why am I so particular about this fire? Well, it's because this was a calamity. And this was a calamity of bureaucracy. And they let the Palisades down. And they need to acknowledge this. And they need to show some contrition, or else I swear to you, they are going to start getting booed out of Starbucks. If they continue to call themselves heroes, if they continue to do these victory laps, they are going to get booed out of Starbucks. They're going to have people throwing beer bottles at their heads. And it's like, dude, firefighters are the ultimate heroes. Nobody hates on firefighters. Well, they do now. They do now. Because not only did they allow this rekindle, but they are continuing with this cover-up. And PIO Eric Scott is the front man for that because he's the public information officer. So you would think he would have some kind of self-awareness and be able to read the room and understand there's no appetite for the PIO, who's been covering this up, to do a memoir and profit off of it while people are still suffering. Well, I guess he does have some self-awareness because, guys, we got him. We got him. He deleted the tweet. He deleted the tweet. I had posted this earlier because, the tweet didn't get much traction. I said, after his agency walked away from a smoldering brush fire that inevitably rekindled to destroy the Palisades and kill 12 people, this public servant who participated in the whitewash has now decided to cash in on the tragedy for the 1-year anniversary. I'm kind of speechless. And the fact that he's putting this out, it's timed with the 1-year anniversary of the fire. Dude, what is wrong with these people? Have they just been eating their own? I can't even say it. You know what I mean? Have they been jerking themselves off for so long that they actually believe this hype, that they're untouchable, they're gods? Firefighters are gods. They're not human beings who get drunk and get into bar fights. They don't cheat on their wives. Of course, they do all of these things. They're human beings, and human beings are fallible. And the LAFD is extremely fallible, as we've seen. Now, I don't want to let these people off the hook. I know I've focused so much on the state, but lest you forget, there was an after-action report. And in light of what Eric Scott is doing, even though I'm glad we were able to bully him into deleting this tweet, and he should totally scrap this book. By the way, there's a foreword by Sean Penn. Dude, this is so out of touch. I can't even begin to describe it. Remember, Sean Penn lost his home. God forbid that. I mean, that's terrible. I'm not laughing at that part. But he lost his home in Malibu in 1993. 25 years later, you have the Woolsey fire. Now, in between, he lost a trailer in 2008 to another brush fire in Malibu. And then he almost lost his home again 25 years later because, of course, Malibu Canyon burns like clockwork every 2.5 decades. And he had to evacuate again during the Woolsey fire and almost lost his home again. Because, he doesn't pay attention to the stuff. He didn't clear his brush. And, of course, who did he blame? He blamed you. He blamed you for your SUV. He blamed climate change, like these people always do. And on the back of Eric Scott's book, he's talking about the hurricane force winds, which of course we know is a lie. It's all fake. So this dude, it's like he wants you to forget all the things that they did wrong. Okay. And that's understandable. You're the PIO, you're trying to whitewash everything. But I just want to remind everybody just how egregious this is. Because we focus so much on the state, yes, the state is culpable. I do want to bring our attention back to everything that the Los Angeles Fire Department did wrong, okay? These are not sacred cows. These are human beings. And these human beings get paid a lot of fucking money. Eric Scott, I believe he got paid $330,000 last year. And now he's trying to make some money off of a memoir. He can't even acknowledge, before he's been able to acknowledge the failures of his own agency, he's cashing in with a memoir. I wonder if he's going to donate all the profits to people like Spencer Pratt. Dude, I've lost money on this. Like flying to DC, flying to the Palisades, flying to Florida for another meeting. I've lost thousands of dollars on this stuff. I'm never going to make that money back. And this dude, he's part of the agency responsible for this, and he's going to profit off of it. You got to be kidding me. Now, let's go over some of the things in the LAFD after action report. This was released by the Los Angeles Fire Department. And I don't think we took enough time to really examine just how egregious it was. So I went through it again, and I pulled some of the lowlights from this. Because keep in mind, this is from the Los Angeles Fire Department. This is them trying to put their best spin on what happened on the Palisades fire. Wait till you read some of these highlights, lowlights. I'm gonna need a little sip. You guys don't mind if I do Coke in front of you, yeah? From the LAFD AAR. When initial task forces and strike teams deployed to their area of responsibility, most did not communicate their needs for resources. What? Delaying the necessary support to effectively provide structured defense. So they didn't call in resources. They see a bunch of homes on fire. They know, okay, we need at least 3 engine companies for each structure. So we need 5 strike teams, right? They didn't do that. They didn't order anything. They just rolled up and they're like, okay, we got 5 engines. We got 5 homes on fire. We need 15 engines. Let's just go to work. They didn't even order anything. Several resources initially contributed significantly to saving numerous homes during the early stages of the incident. However, these resources were either reassigned or withdrawn from their areas of responsibility. They pulled out, ultimately returning to the homes that were subsequently burned due to a deficiency in tactical patrol. Do you guys understand how bad this is? So they left an area where homes were on fire. They just left. And then they never patrolled the streets where there was a structure threat. Remember this video? Remember this? So this is a civilian driving through his neighborhood. And of course, there's no homes on fire. There's no homes on fire. But clearly you have a lot of threat here because what you see is ornamental vegetation on fire. Now, what do you not see? You don't see any resources. You see 0 firefighters. And you can see for blocks and blocks through there. You don't see any flashing lights. You don't see any ambers. Look at this. These streets were completely abandoned. And then all these houses burned down. Because look, a small spot fire like that below some agave could have been put out really easily. Those cypress trees, they threw a deck gun on that. They could have gotten those out, right? But instead, these things are completely unattended because they just abandoned the neighborhood. And they admit it in their own AAR. They did not do tactical patrols. Unbelievable. Let's move on. Chief officers had the flexibility to patrol the area to secure cellular signal and gather intel from the division supervisor about fire location and predicted direction. Always keep eyes on your fire. This is like rule number 1 with wildland firefighting. Monitor fire progress through the technological applications and obtain intel on adjoining forces and their tactical frequencies to maintain situational status. However, some of them never relayed that intel, nor knew that doing so was an available option. Due to the inability to secure the origin of the fire, what? Who in here has read the IRPG? Who in here just has a basic understanding of wildland firefighting tactics? What is the first thing that you do on a wildfire? So the general strategy is anchor, flank, and pinch. So if you have a fire, especially a wind-driven fire, it's very directional. Okay, so if you have your point of origin, you have the lowest amount of fire activity here, the highest amount of fire activity is that flaming front, and it's going that way, right? That means your heel, the origin, has the least amount of fire activity because, okay, now it's burning against the wind. So you secure that heel, so you have an anchor point. That anchor point, you secure your back door to make sure that now you just have to look in that direction. And then you start flanking the thing where the fire is less intense because you're not going to be able to stop that head of fire. You sneak up to the head of fire and then just slowly take little bites out of it until you pinch it off. Anchor, flank, pinch. The first thing you do is you anchor that fire. Due to the inability to secure the origin of the fire, they never secured the heel. They never did the most basic thing that you do in any wildfire. The fire gradually spread, creating topographical runs towards the north, away from where the fire was burning, to an area that was completely out of danger and should have remained out of danger. Ultimately, the fire burned around the Palisades Highlands community, threatening homes by the evening and burning down about 120 of them. The inability to secure the fire's point of origin allowed the spread to continue unchecked to the north and to the east, with lateral spread across thousands of acres, where it continued on to wreck Topanga Canyon and Malibu. All because they didn't do the most basic thing that you do on any wildfire. Superpath says, close the back door. Are you guys starting to get more pissed off at Eric Scott or more understanding of why you'd want to write a memoir? The LAFD's maximum commitment plan was not effectively utilized during the initial attack, resulting in unused resources that could have been deployed to respond to the Palisades incident, instead remaining in their local first-in districts when the incident required additional resources. As the incident escalated, battalions lacked adequate coverage in the city because MFC did not request regional and state resources to backfill Los Angeles Fire Department fire stations. Is this their first time running a fire? So they just had their first in stations. They had engines just sitting at their station like, well, we got to have coverage. What if a homeless drug addict collapses on Skid Row and we need to go shove some Narcan up his nose? We have to have at least 5 engine companies for that guy. Fuck the Palisades. They abandoned the city. Transitioning from offensive interior structure firefighting in full structural PPE to prolonged exterior structure defense operations posed a significant physical challenge. Why the fuck are they going interior on all these homes? Guys, you got to be bumping and rolling. They're like going interior when you have entire neighborhoods burning down. They're going interior and they were like grabbing art. They were grabbing like people's belongings and then putting them into cases outside and trash cans and stuff when you have entire blocks burning down. Why are they doing that? If somebody has a good explanation, I would love to hear that. Several chief officers had limited or no experience in managing an incident of such complexity. Some were unfamiliar with their roles within the command and general staff and reverted to their previous knowledge at lower ranks. Why were they ever promoted then? Clearly, they weren't promoted on qualifications. Now, as I understand it, in the federal fire service, you have a task book and you have to get signed off on all kinds of different qualifications in order to promote. It's real basic. How are they promoting people at the LAFD if they don't have these basic qualifications? What are the criteria that they're using to promote these people? Any of you guys know? This resulted in key command staff and staff positions remaining unfilled and associated tasks being neglected. Chief officers served as task force leaders rather than strike team leaders or in higher operational roles. Consequently, this resulted in missed opportunities to maintain a broader strategic perspective, meaning they didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have anyone competent running divisions. Casey K says DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. Was that the criteria that they were using to promote these chief officers? Because clearly they didn't sign off their task books. I mean, I don't know these municipal agencies like I do the Forest Service. Do they have task books where they have to sign up on quals? They just have to pass a test, Donia says. Yeah, wink, wink. I don't know. Please, someone educate me, by the way. Do they have task books for municipal fire departments where they got to get their quals signed off, just like in the Forest Service? Usually, you can't promote without that. You have to like check off these boxes. 20, hand crews were reassigned to other incident priorities as they attempted to contain the heel of the fire. So it wasn't like earlier, you notice how their language said, due to an inability to contain the heel of the fire. No. That almost makes it sound like, oh, well, they had hand crews up there, but the fire activity got too intense. They had to bump out. No, they were reassigned. They were reassigned from the most important thing to other incident priorities as they attempted to contain the heel of the fire, which reduced the effectiveness of the containment efforts. You have no containment. You have to anchor the fire. Otherwise, there is no containment. And eventually led to the heel of the fire moving northerly and easterly, eventually affecting homes in the Palisades, affecting homes in the Palisades Highland area in the evening and contributing to other communities being impacted. There were multiple communities that were not at risk with this fire. It was a directional fire. It should have been like a candy corn kind of shape, right? A wedge. So a little bit of lateral spread, but primarily it's just directional and it's like a freight train running through there because of those winds. But instead, this thing hooked all the way around to the Getty, right? All the way around to the Getty and into Malibu. That's because they pulled the hand crews away from securing the heel of the fire. This is so fucking egregious. These agencies should not have immunity from at least civil litigation. They don't deserve it. They don't deserve it. Reminder, just the PIO got paid $330,000 this last year. Superpath says, bro, really Really named the book Calm Amidst Chaos with this AAR from his own department. Yeah, reminder, this is the Los Angeles Fire Department's whitewashed version. This is their own after action report. This isn't me telling them what they did wrong with a critical eye. This is them tattling on themselves. That's how bad. Can you imagine how bad do you think the real story is? If this is the LAFD's story, do you think they're giving you 100% candor with this? I don't. And it's already this bad. KCK says, how can you secure the heel of the fire when the state park reps are tossing vegetation on whatever lines were cut? Bro, we are going to get to this in a minute. Thank you, Casey. We are going to get to, so remember Casey's comments here. How can you secure the heel of the fire when the state park reps are tossing vegetation on whatever lines were cut? We're going to get to this. Let me do a little more Coke. A rare incident mindset occasionally causes officers and firefighters to think and operate beyond standard safety protocols. This is them trying to be fucking heroes. What was that movie with Howie Long when he was like a firefighter and he was like throwing an axe at somebody? You guys remember that movie? They all think they're fucking Howie Long in the LAFD. Now I've seen some DMs from LAFD guys trying to defend their chief, and they actually refer to themselves as heroes. That was the most cringe thing that I've ever seen. Guys, yeah, some firefighters, you guys are heroes. You don't ever call yourself a hero. That's the first rule of being a hero is you don't call yourself a hero. This resulted in companies undertaking exceptional risks due to the incident's unusual nature, sometimes lacking the discipline necessary to define clear objectives. So they were too busy trying to be heroes and do some hero shit that they didn't do the basics, and the fire got away from them. Some abandoned less appealing tasks in pursuit of more attractive assignments, becoming overly eager with their responsibilities instead of concentrating on the incident priorities in the area of responsibility. This is their own report. Do you realize how egregious that sounds? And now what are we talking about? We're talking about something like this. This isn't sexy. Going and spraying some water on some cypress trees, that's not sexy. Putting out a spot fire in some ornamental vegetation, that's not sexy. You know what's sexy? Throwing on your structure gear, throwing on your SCBA, and going interior. On a house that's already lost, we're going to go interior. We're going to go do some hero shit. They actually admitted that they abandoned their tasks because they weren't sexy enough in favor of more attractive assignments. Not easier assignments, right? It's not like, oh, this is too tough. I'm tired. I got to take on something more simple. No, more attractive assignments. Dude, what the fuck is wrong with these people? They're so obsessed with being heroes that they abandoned the normal tactical protocols of a firefight just because they wanted to do some hero shit. This is their own after-action report. The initial and subsequent geographical control objectives developed by the incident command during the initial and extended attack did not encompass the required work of the division supervisors to provide a control line to meet the objectives. So this is the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. No coordination, no sense of like how big you got to draw your box, where you should actually have control features. It's like bad news bears. The normal brush response on a red flag day would have consisted of 27 fire resources. When the initial brush response was only assembled for a normal to moderate vegetation response, really? We had warnings about this red flag day, like particularly dangerous situation. Rich Thompson, the great Richie Rich, was predicting catastrophe for like a week straight. They only dispatched a normal vegetation response. It seriously impeded the ability of resources to provide initial suppression and structured defense efforts on the initial attack. The most important time, when you got to hit it hard and fast. ICs and the dispatch center need to critically analyze whether the computer-aided dispatch system is recommending the correct amount of resources on a given day and immediately augment the deployment by dispatching the additional resources requested. The phrase hit it hard and fast, like I just said, encompasses all aspects of combating a wind-driven vegetation fire This terminology has been incorporated into the fire department's procedural manual for managing brush fires for decades and is constantly encouraged in the mindset of fire service leaders, particularly concerning aircraft involved in wind-driven vegetation fires. Multiple agencies across the state have recently focused on the expeditious deployment of aircraft and the identification of incidents that may necessitate a substantial initial deployment of aircraft. This is where it gets really good. Although significant wind was present from the onset and persisted throughout the incident, initial wind speed readings at the time of the alarm indicated opportunities for a considerable request for aircraft. What does that mean? There were no hurricane force winds. That's what that means. The wind speeds were so low, they could have ordered the world. And the thing is, they had a bunch of helicopters. They had fixed wing. They had the super scoopers come out, but for some reason, they didn't have the tankers come out for like 2 hours. For like 2 hours. They could fly. They just didn't order them. They didn't order them for like 90 minutes. So the fire was already steamrolling through neighborhoods. They still hadn't ordered them. It is imperative that incident commanders possess a comprehensive understanding of the types and capabilities of aircraft available within the region and state, and in the event of an anomalous wind-driven vegetation fire, request the deployment of all available aircraft. While Type 2 and Type 3 air tankers are effective for deploying retardant within the canyons of the city of Los Angeles, this particular fire necessitated the need for at least 2 VLATs in conjunction with Type 2 and 3 fixed wing and contracted rotor. So they really screwed the pooch. Steve Kerrigan says the IRPG, the Incident Response Pocket Guide, by the way, says a roof over 25% on fire is a loss and to move on. Holding lines is pretty damn important. See, that's what I thought. And when I've seen, like, for example, the bridge fire, remember when the bridge fire moved into Wrightwood, right? It burned into Wrightwood, and San Bernardino and LA County were actually very effective. And Wrightwood has actually, as a community, done a pretty good job of brush clearance. They had some structure loss, but that could have leveled the entire community. And they're surrounded by pine trees, like they're more surrounded than the Palisades are. But they were well prepared. And San Bernardino and LA County, it's a mutual aid zone. They did a really good job of bumping and rolling, where they don't necessarily get like tied up to hydrants. They don't get fully committed to a structure. They'll deploy hoses, try to knock it down, and then move on to the next. Knock it down, move on to the next. It was very effective. It's not 100%, but trying to keep that fire from progressing through the neighborhood and knocking down those dominoes is super critical. If you're like taking time to go interior on a house when you've got wind that's blowing embers and it's leapfrogging streets, like, guys, you got to be chasing that fire front wherever it's going and putting out those spot fires that you see all over the neighborhood. Bump and roll. All right. There's more, but these were like the worst aspects of it. And remember, this is from their own department. Okay, so this is them putting the best face that they can. This is them putting lipstick on the pig. Okay, so just remember that whenever you see this dude promoting his book, they still have not reconciled all of these things. They still have not communicated with the public in any meaningful way or shown any contrition over what went wrong. Now, KCK had mentioned something about the state park, because again, look, I'm only pointing out these issues with the LAFD because Eric Scott is doing what I think is atrocious. Okay, but at the end of the day, the state is very much on the hook for this fire, and okay, yet again, here I am breaking news far before the corporate media had it. These texts. Phil, the great Phil Cunningham. The cunning Phil Cunningham says, wait, there weren't hurricane force winds? I had no idea. Yeah. Again, it's like the department in their own after action report is saying, yeah, the winds were actually fine. Could have ordered a ton of aircraft. I don't know why we didn't. And then at the same time, their PIOs and their chiefs are all talking about hurricane force winds, and they continue to lie. It's just like, these people are so shameless. So now I broke this story where I had posted these text messages that the state was compelled by the courts to put out. Okay, and these are text messages between their reads, their resource advisors. Now, I want to show you how NBC covered this story. Okay, I want you to watch this, and then I'm gonna show you what they missed. See if you can see it.
Now emerging from the lawsuits filed by thousands of fire victims in the Palisades. Text messages from state officials could help explain what happened in the days before that fire.
Our investigative reporter Eric Leonard is live on a newsroom with what these messages reveal. Eric.
We're seeing for the first time messages and maps exchanged by California State Parks employees on the morning of the Lackman fire, January 1st. Lawyers for the Palisades Fire victims who are suing say these messages could suggest that some of those employees were worried that firefighting would impact environmentally sensitive plants and sites, and they plan to visit the scene of the fire. Screenshots of the messages included in new court filings show state parks workers assigned to Topanga State Park were discussing what to do in order to protect endangered astragalus plants along roads and trails, right where the January 1st Lackman fire had burned the night before. One employee writing, "So I imagine they are cutting at least some astragalus with those hand crews. We will hold for now until I hear heavy equipment is being deployed." Another message, "There is an endangered plant population and a cultural site in the immediate area." Another employee texted back the next morning with a photo of the burn area. "Hose lay leaks are tearing up small bits of the trail." And someone else responding, "Can you make sure no suppression impacts at Skull Rock, please?" Skull Rock is close to where both Palisades fires ignited. And these state parks maps with some information redacted were also in the court filing. They show areas that appear to be within the Lackman burn area that the state deemed as avoidance areas, where no heavy equipment or digging should be allowed. Lawyers for the fire victims say this photo from another court filing suggests LA City firefighters were visited by those state parks employees and may have prematurely cut off the mop-up from the Lackman fire, something the state parks department has denied and called a ludicrous idea. The ATF says it concluded embers smoldering underground from the Lackman fire reignited on January 7th and caused the Palisades fire. The 29-year-old man arrested for alleged...
All right, nobody cares about that guy. Nobody cares about the commie arsonist because all he did was 8 acres of brush. And now I think, I think anybody who starts a wildfire should go away for life or worse, because it's legitimately a weapon of mass destruction. And just keep this in mind. You know, there was some news today about, you know, like some bombing threat from some, you know, commie terrorists who were plotting like a New Year's Eve bombing. It doesn't have to be this sophisticated. And I keep warning that all it takes is just one road flare on a windy day and you can wipe out an entire city. Okay. People need to be taking this stuff more seriously. But at the end of the day, you know, this dude did 8 acres of damage. Okay. What did they miss in this story? Because, you know, I was stoked to see that NBC is covering this. Yeah, there were 2 days after I posted all this stuff. But I'm glad that they're covering it. You know, my goal isn't necessarily to like have the scoops or have the exclusive. My goal is to get as many eyeballs on it as possible. I only have 10,000 followers. So it's like, you know, we need it in other people's hands, not mine. That said, if these people are going to report on it, they have to actually understand what the fuck they're looking at because they totally missed it, right? They didn't go into any detail whatsoever and they totally missed the whole point of this stuff. Now, let's take a look at some of these texts. I'm gonna show. I ran out of slides, so I'm gonna show you this one from my Twitter feed. Let's just see this one. So here they are. Notice how many times they say astragalus. Say that 10 times really fast. But they're worried about the astragalus and the astragalus. They're really worried about that astragalus. There are a lot. Notice what they don't mention: people, houses. Are there any structures threatened? You know. They're more worried about and just so you know, astragalus is milk vetch. That's what that is. So here they are saying, so I imagine they're cutting at least some astragalus with those hand crews. They're really horrified that hand crews might be cutting some plants, probably trying to improve the fire road. It's badly overgrown just south of the fire. Why is this so damning? And why did NBC miss this? So these people are clearly well aware of the condition of the fuels on this. So they know quite well this is a fire trap. This is what this text indicates from Noah Riche. And she was just deposed today. And it was a very interesting deposition. I cannot wait to be able to talk to you about this kind of stuff. It's badly overgrown just south of the fire. So here they are acknowledging that they know the fire risk. They know that they've been neglecting this property and that it's threatening the community. They know this. That's why this is damning. And then it gets worse. Here's this, and this is what Casey had referenced earlier. Now, a lot of people missed this. When these texts were first released, I don't think people quite understood what they were looking at. Now, in here, you can't quite see it, but you can see there's a crew cutting in the middle of nowhere, right? Just in the middle of the day. This is January 1st. This is in the afternoon of January 1st. Okay, so this is after the Lockman fire had been extinguished, but it was still smoldering and smoking heavily. It was very hot. There's going to be more on that in the coming week. The next image is just, okay, the crews are gone. There's just a bunch of brush. So what are we looking at? And then this comment, first 50 feet of hand line completely covered with bush. They went full bush. Pretty much all of what was visible from the trail. Chief Mullen and his crews were very good to work with. And Noah says, amazing. So they are applauding putting flammable brush over the containment line of the Lockman fire. While the fire is still smoldering. The fire was still smoldering the day after this. So what do you guys with fire experience, what do you think happens to a containment line when you put flammable brush all over it? So here they are, they've been exposed, uncontaining the fire. They uncontained the Lockman fire. This is like, if you put anything flammable over a containment line, you've destroyed the containment line. It's no longer contained. Do you understand that? Because the whole point of constructing handline is to get to bare mineral soil, okay? Nothing that can burn. And to the point where you will have guys on a hotshot crew with a monkey's paw, a tiny little rake, like the size of your hand, just like right at the back. And it's really funny to watch, like these big tough dudes. This guy's got this tiny little rake and he's just scratching little blades of grass off of that line. That's how important it is that you have nothing flammable connecting the bad side, the dumb side to the smart side, right? You can't have anything there. And here they are deliberately cutting down flammable brush and then destroying the containment line the day of the fire while it's still smoldering. It was still smoldering the following day. NBC didn't cover this at all. They don't know what they're looking at. Added to that, there's this. This is a screenshot from another conversation. Happy New Year, buddy. Your team going to tell us out to Temescal tonight. Heck no, that area is full of endangered plants. I would be a real idiot to ever put a dozer in that area. I'm so trained. Now, who is that? This is a coordinator for the dozers. And I believe they work for the Los Angeles Fire Department. I think they would normally have to bring in the LA County dozers in there. But here he is indicating, no, I'm well trained. I know that we can't take dozers up there. And this is the linchpin here. So what the state is trying to get away with is they're saying, oh, we don't direct it. We didn't tell them not to do anything. But what this indicates is that's because they don't have to. Because clearly there is an established protocol where they know that they can't do this stuff. So it's like self-censorship in a way. So if the Los Angeles Fire Department has a history of going to fires on Topanga State Park and getting in trouble for using dozers, and that is what happened, by the way, okay? They got in trouble for putting dozers on a previous fire, and they had to come back up, and they had to work the area for days because, oh, they ran over some milk veg plants. You guys can look this up. And again, like, why am I doing this? Why is the media not covering this? They don't understand what they're looking at. And it seems like they don't even try to understand it. I don't get it. This is like the linchpin of the whole case. The state is totally cooked now. There's another thing that, again, I'm not allowed to say yet. But I teased it last week and I said, today's the turning point for this case. And they are going to win. They are going to win. There's something that's been missing from this lawsuit from the start. Does anybody, what's been missing? That its absence is like really jarring. What's missing from this lawsuit? I can tell you what, if you can identify what's been missing from this legal case, it is no longer absent. I can't tell you yet. But the fact that this thing that's been missing is no longer absent means that, yeah, they're not going to lose this case. So that's the question for you guys. I can't give you more detail than that. So you just have to ask yourself, why? There's something that's been missing from this case, and it's kind of inexplicable, especially given the consequences of all this stuff. Responsibility for the screw up. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. I'm talking about a person or a thing, an entity. A person, a thing, or an entity, not not a characteristic, not honor, not integrity, because obviously that's been missing the entire time. But I mean, like something tangible that's missing from the case that could exist in a court document, for example. There's something that's been missing that nobody's really discussed, right? But the absence is it's very jarring. It is no longer absent. And that to me is the bellwether for what the outcome is going to be. And I think it's been sealed. You guys can mark that. Again, I'm not trying to be coy. It's just, I'm trying to be respectful. But now you know how I just happen to have all these scoops like way before the media is. Maybe that's why I do a better job of covering it, because I've got more time to analyze it. Maybe they get it like 20 minutes before they go on air, so that would be the more generous way of looking at it. Now, we talked a lot about how the state screwed the Palisades. How is the state screwing all of California? And how is the state screwing the federal taxpayer? Donia de California says maps. We do have some maps, but there's more to come. There is more to come. The state actually just got busted. They had some maps that they failed to turn over that they were supposed to. So those should be coming forthwith. And as soon as they're introduced into the court, I will provide them for you. Because they are going to shed some light on a few things. There's another thing there's forensic analysis that has to happen. They're putting together something that I think is going to be really damning. It's going to be really damning. What's missing is the fired former chief. That's a good point. I don't think you're going to get much from her. I think the fired former chief is more interested in becoming a millionaire, which seems to be a theme with overhead at LAFD. They just care about money. I think Chief Crowley is more interested not in candor or justice for anybody, but in cashing in on her. I won't say it was unjustifiable, because she absolutely deserved to get fired, but the way and the timing she was fired, and for what, she only got fired because she said that there were some problems with the response. That's why she got fired. And that, she said that Karen Bass's budget cuts impeded their ability to respond to the fire. That's why she got fired, for telling the truth, right? So anyway, board, I wonder what she signed not to talk. Yeah, Steve, I think it has more to do with her attorney, because Chief Crowley is suing Karen Bass. So I think it's more that her attorney is saying, hey man, just keep quiet. Keep quiet if you can. Hold on, Spencer's sending me a text right now. What is he sending me? The era of mega disasters. Oh man. National Geographic. The Santa Ana winds were topping out at nearly 100 miles an hour. Oh my goodness. All right, so Spencer likes to raise my blood pressure. He just texted me an article from Nat Geo, and of course they're garbage. Repeating this lie, the Santa Ana winds were topping out at nearly 100 miles an hour. Let me see if I can, I'll just show you on my phone. I don't know if you guys can see that. Nah, exposure's not going to work. So anyway, Nat Geo apparently is writing about the Palisades fire, and they're lying about it just like everybody else. I don't know how we disrupt this, but it's like, it's just nonstop, this mythology. So that's why we have to keep doing it live. All right, so let's get back on track. Let's talk about how the state is screwing over the rest of the state, not just the Palisades. CalFire, they recently tweeted about just how much fire they were putting on the ground, just how many acres they've been treating. We've talked about this quite a bit. They're bragging that they've done 800,000 acres of treatment, right? We've talked about how they like to use the word treatment because treatment includes prescribed fire, but also a bunch of other processes that aren't prescribed fire. So rather than saying, hey, we burned with prescribed fire, we burned 800,000 acres, they'll reference prescribed fire, but they'll use the word treated, so that way they can pad their stats. Now, there is the California Forest Resiliency Task Force. Is that what it's called? So anyway, they've got this website where it's like consolidating all the state's fuel mitigation efforts. I want to go through this. I'm going to make the case to you that CalFire is legitimately defrauding you, putting you at risk if you live in California, and also defrauding the federal taxpayer. And this speaks to what Senator Scott is investigating. And I've submitted this to the senator because they need to be investigating this. They're looking into this very thing. Like, where are all the federal funds that are assigned to California for fire mitigation? Where are they actually going? Well, they came up with this website. Let me see if I can pull it up. California Wildfire Forest Resiliency Task Force. Bang. Here it is. Okay. Cool. I'm going to pull it up. And I'm just going to give you a little overview before we dive into it, just so you can orient yourself. So this is the California Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force. Continues nation-leading efforts to protect communities. This is such a fucking joke. California does the least amount of prescribed fire of all the states who need it the most. Florida does like 2 million acres. Again, all right, we're already off to a bad start. But they've got this, and it's a snow job. But like on this website, they've got this like dashboard where the treatment dashboard. They've got a treatment dashboard where it's like, we're like super transparent. We're going to show you all the stuff that we're doing. And they were recently bragging about doing 800. Oh goodness. All right. It opened up in a new window. So anyway, I'm going to show you just the key points. But anyway, this is like their big braggadocious agency thing where they're trying to brag about just how much treatment they're doing. But guys, it is so bad. It's so much worse than I originally thought. Here's the plan. The overarching goal of the state-federal agreement. Remember, state and federal agreement, okay? So this is absolutely under the purview of what Senator Rick Scott is investigating. The overarching goal of the state-federal agreement is to improve the health and resilience of the state's forested landscapes. While forest health can have multiple definitions, for the purpose of this action plan, healthy forests includes woodlands, grasslands, chaparral, shrublands, and related vegetation types that yield both ecological and community benefits. Healthy vegetation improves climate resilience. Of course, it has to be about climate. Reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfire, safeguard water and air quality, protect fish and wildlife habitat, and however, as shown below, each of these vegetation types provides unique benefits, face different risks, and therefore require different management strategies. Okay. First, they have to do their little salutation to their like cult leader Zog. First, we recognize that climate change increases the frequency and severity of catastrophic wildfires. They can't help themselves. They have to do this. It's unbelievable. It's like living in a weird cult or a dictatorship where it's like, yeah, praise be to climate change. More than 100 peer-reviewed studies published since 2013 demonstrate a strong consensus that climate change extends the periods of wildfire risk and enhances the likelihood of fires. Land use and forest management practices are also contributing factors, but cannot fully explain the magnitude of wildfires in recent years. All right, they got that out of the way. Investments in forest management. The state has invested $1.4 billion in California climate investments. Projects that provide climate mitigation. Climate mitigation, what does that mean? How do you mitigate a climate? Or adaptation benefits and contribute to forest health and fire protection, okay? So you see how they're laundering this stuff. They want to make you believe that this is about fire protection, but ultimately it's about climate initiatives, which are very nebulous. This is just the preamble, guys. I'm going to show you how corrupt this is. And I think I'm at a point where I can't defend CalFire anymore. Orange Chicken Thief says CDF has always been suspect, including their tactics. Now you have the receipts. Daniel Firecopter says CalFire better have their fancy C-130s ready for next year. It's gonna be bad. Fourth, we recognize the scientific consensus that frequent low-intensity fire can be a positive force, in improving forest health and biodiversity and forest and community safety. We must draw upon the practices of Native Americans, ranchers, and rural communities to rapidly expand the use of prescribed fire and bring these best practices to state lands. Again, as your resident Choctaw Indian, I give you guys permission to stop this virtue signaling where you have to like tip your hat to the Native Americans. It's like, yes, yeah, we all understood they had proper forest management for thousands of years, but not all of it was wisdom, right? Some of it was just, they were very alacrity. They just kind of reckless. They burned down huge swaths of forest because they didn't care. They didn't have a sense of like, oh, we got to protect the planet. They were just concerned about their own survival. Okay. So yes, it had that benefit, but like, you guys don't have to do this, right? Do we really think that like some redneck hotshots in Oregon don't understand this? Like they need to consult an indigenous practitioner to understand how to use a drip torch? Like, come on, just get the work done. So tired of all this virtue signaling. Like it's not gonna do anything for me. Okay, this is the beginning of how nefarious this stuff is. When they say that they've treated 800,000 acres, they're not talking about an area measurement of acres. They're talking about activity acres. What are activity acres, you say? Because I thought activity was measured through effort, not area measurement. How can you define activity? Is not an area, right? How can you measure it with acres? Well, CalFire does this. I should say California. Activity acres track every treatment action, including those that occurred in sequence on the same acre over time. For example, a thinning project may have been conducted on an acre prior to a prescribed burn. So they count the same acre twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. I've told you about how they do this. Here they are admitting it. So every process that they conduct on an acre, they count as a separate acre so they can pad their stats. Spencer Pratt is in the chat. We got a Pratt chat. The Nat Geo issue with the photos of the fire victims opening line is 100-mile-an-hour winds. I just texted you the photo. Yeah, I just read that, dude. They're going to hang on to this forever. Nat Geo they're just a climate change cult rag. Like obviously that's all they're going to do. And so they're going to continue this lie. And the thing is, Spencer, like, haven't you noticed this lie is fucking everywhere? So the new fire chief, who we're all told, oh, respect the guy, he's lying about it. The PIO in the back of his fucking memoir is saying there's 100-mile-an-hour winds. Everyone on the news is saying 100-mile-an-hour winds. Gavin is saying 100-mile-an-hour winds attached to a fire, right? Those weasel words that don't mean anything. God, dude, it's never going to stop. I fucking hate Nat Geo, dude. Yeah, this is bad. So anyway, California, they count different processes on the same acre. So they recount the acre. And they'll do this like up to 12 times, okay? And this is just the beginning. It gets so much worse, guys. Activity. What are these activities that somehow are measured in acreage? These are the categories. Mechanical and hand fuels reduction, that is the lion's share. And by the way, mechanical and hand fuels reduction, that is the most expensive way to get rid of fuels, right? One of the most efficient way is with fire, okay? Because you can do basically an unlimited amount of acreage with just like one bit of fire. Prescribed fire, tree planting, what? Targeted grazing and timber harvest. Okay, already you have 2 very suspect things. Tree planting, they're counting tree planting in their treatment that they're boasting as fire reduction and fire risk mitigation. Adding fuels is one of the processes they count. And they almost have more tree planting. They're almost adding more fuels than they are doing prescribed fire. This is just the beginning, guys, let's go in a little bit more depth into what's in these particular activity categories. Here is a description of all the things that's within these dashboard categories that they consider fire mitigation treatment. Let's look at tree planting. What's in that? Site preparation, tree planting, and tree seeding. They count site preparation as a treatment for mitigating a wildfire. So if they just do a little site prep, if they flag off an area of 100 acres, they will count that 100 acres. If they were to seed bomb an area, like fly over it and drop seeds, which they'll do, they'll count that. And they count this as in the same category where they're trying to conflate prescribed fire treatments with all of this stuff, adding fuels. Included in that is site prep. That's what they're counting when they say, oh, we've done 800,000 acres. It gets worse. Notice one of the other activities was timber harvest. Now, timber harvest, okay, that's legitimate. They're actually getting rid of trees. Now, it's less than they're planting. As you can see, they're planting twice as many trees as they're getting rid of. But let's look at what's included in the timber harvest, because what's interesting about a timber harvest? Orange Chicken Thief says, oh, by the way, my son's crew in Florida burned 6,000 acres last week alone. They have 22,000 acres left in their prescription. No will to do it in California. Dude, 22,000 acres in a single prescription for his crew in Florida. This puts California to shame. 22,000 acres is like what they'll do for the entire state. That'll be their entire year of actual prescribed fire. I know, again, they'll lie and they'll say, oh, we've done hundreds of thousands of acres, but you see what they're counting. Now, within timber harvest, again, getting rid of trees here. Okay, this is great. But when you look at all this stuff, do you realize all of these things are commercial activities? Ski Fiend says there are laws requiring planting in many instances. I 100% believe that. This is not exculpatory for California. These are California's laws. These are their laws. They can change those laws. You know, Gavin's always bragging about his executive orders, cutting red tape that never actually gets cut. Why don't they change the laws? And I'm not against tree planting, right? It's got to be judicious. But you'll notice, like, if you've ever seen those videos of when they're actually planting the trees, they do it in this incredibly uniform fashion, which every forester will tell you, who's being honest, they'll tell you that is the worst way to plant trees. You don't want it to be like these perfectly straight rows. It's like setting it up for a catastrophic wildfire. It's so maddening to watch these people do it. And it's funny because, like, whenever the people post videos of people planting these trees, you know, they got a little sack and a spade and they're popping these things in. It's like, oh my God, look at Sarah. She planted 6,000 trees in 12 hours. It's like, bro, she just set up a catastrophic wildfire. It needs to be more scattered. It needs to be more random. You're just setting it up for failure. It's unbelievable. So when you look at this, something like special products removal, okay, that's like maybe not for lumber, but for power poles, like wooden utility poles that we inexplicably still use in fire zones. A lot of these are industrial operations. Okay, so this is harvesting for commercial products, where the eliminating the fire threat, that's just, I don't know, incidental. Like the purpose of this isn't to reduce the fire threat. And the thing that anybody knows about logging is a lot of times logging / increases the risk of wildfire. Okay, this happens all the time. During the Dixie Fire, I had some of the fellows sending me shots, you know, when they were up in the forest during the Dixie Fire, they abandoned their entire division because there were stacks and stacks of all this slash just sitting everywhere throughout the forest. Just stacks of dead timber, branches all over the place. They're like, we can't stop anything coming through here. So they just abandoned the division entirely. Okay, so all of this stuff, this is just commercial harvest. This has nothing to do with fire mitigation. it might be incidental to this, but this is companies making money off of doing this stuff. Now it gets worse. It gets worse. The increased use of prescribed fire. Now, fire has a long history as a vegetation management tool in California used by Native Americans, ranchers, rural communities, firefighters. Prescribed fire, or the use of fire under safe conditions, is now well recognized as one of the most versatile and cost-effective tools available to reduce fuels buildup in forests and the risk of catastrophic wildfires while increasing climate resilience. Again, dude, they can't even get through one sentence. They can't just give prescribed fire its praise. They have to say it has to do with climate. Controlled burns also support native plants, boost soil health, and increase ecosystem function. Man, it seems like there's no downside. Why aren't we doing more of it? Fire is among the most critical ecological treatment methods for maintaining a myriad of functions that collectively contribute to maintaining healthy and resilient forests. Okay, they couldn't be more clear. They have to do this stuff. They have to do prescribed fire. They need to do more of it. Let's look at some of the key points here. This is what their goal is: to significantly expand the use of prescribed fire across the state. CalFire will expand its fuel reduction and prescribed fire programs to treat up to 100,000 acres by 2025. Notice how they, again, this is under the expand the use of prescribed fire across the state column. They're talking about prescribed fire, but what is that first sentence? They will expand its fuels reduction and prescribed fire programs. You notice how they cannot, when it comes down to quantifying what they're doing, they cannot just say prescribed fire. They have to lump in something else that they can launder through other things that aren't prescribed fire, because they're going to pad their stats with all of this. When you do that, when you're lumping it in with all these other fuels reductions, and we see how dubious some of their definitions are, well, technically, they could do 1/4 acre of prescribed fire and then do 99,000 acres of something else, like site prep. And then technically, they've fulfilled their duty, right? You see how they do this? Once you see it, you'll never unsee it. So they want to treat, again, not burn, but treat up to 100,000 acres by 2025. Here we are. We got 2 weeks left. Are they going to do it? Of course not. And the California Department of Parks and Rec, state parks, and other state agencies will also increase the use of prescribed fire in high-risk state lands. Too late. The U.S. Forest Service, in partnership with CalFire, tribal governments, and other agencies, will seek to establish a prescribed fire training center to provide training opportunities for prescribed burn practitioners and focus training efforts on Western ecosystems. CalFire will also establish a new tribal grants program, increase support for workforce development and training programs, and evaluate options to address liability issues for private landowners seeking to conduct prescribed burns. The U.S. Forest Service will significantly expand its prescribed fire program to attain its 500,000 acre target for forest treatments by 2025. Are they doing it? No. So they failed. SuperPav says mastication can make the conditions even worse if you don't follow it up with a burn. That is 100% correct, by the way. That's a very good point. Thank you for that. Now, under their key points, dude, it's the same thing. Utilize all fuels reduction methods to treat up to 100,000 acres by 2025. Man, they will use all fuels reduction methods, right, including site prep and tree planting, to reach this target. They're just trying to pad their stats. And again, this is all under their prescribed fire segment. So they're saying, here's the banner headline. This is what gets your attention. Increase the use of prescribed fire. But when you actually look into what are the key actions here, they're going to use all methods. So they're just trying to launder this stuff, but it gets worse. It gets so much worse. What are all of these methods? Well, let's go into their prescribed fire category and see how they define prescribed fire. Broadcast burn, best kind. Pile burning, that's where they will cut down low-hanging limbs, forest litter, branches that have fallen down, collect them all, put them in a pile, burn them. That's good. It's not as good as a broadcast burn. It should be done in combination with broadcast burns. Look at this last one that they count under prescribed fire. Planned treatment, burned in wildfire. Board Elon Musk says, increasing prescribed fire is basically an admission it should have been done more frequently all along. And that ties in perfectly with this. Planned treatment burned in a wildfire. they count wildfire acres for their prescribed fire acres. They try to qualify it by saying, well, it was a planned treatment. We were going to burn it, but because we dragged our heels, it ended up burning in a catastrophic wildfire. But we're still going to count that. We're still going to count that, even though we failed to get it done, and then it all got wrecked in a wildfire because we didn't get it done. But we were going to do that, and what are we supposed to do? Just take their word on it? Oh yeah, we were planning to do that. Keep in mind that Grizzly Flats burned down because there was a planned prescribed fire project that got delayed for 10 years. Was it the Trestle project? It got delayed for 10 years, would have saved the community. And then the Calder fire burned through and destroyed everything. And they only just recently rebuilt the first house there, by the way. But 4 years later, first house just got built. So they would count the Calder fire. They would count Grizzly Flats getting nuked. They would count those acres in their prescribed fire total. Do you see how fucking corrupt these people are? Planned treatment burned in a wildfire. What's the criteria for what they consider planned? Like they were going to do it next week and, oh man, dang it. This is fucking egregious. The Senate needs to look into this. There's two layers of this. Obviously, they're wasting taxpayer dollars. They're wasting taxpayer dollars. You know, we saw California's invested $1.2 billion. Well, if it costs $1,000 per acre, which is, that's already egregious, but that's California for you. If it costs $1,000 an acre, why don't they have 1.2 million acres? Why don't they have 1.2 million acres done? They don't. So where's the money going? And if part of that total that they're claiming, where they're counting multiple acres or like the same acre multiple times, and they're counting wildfire acres to pad their stats, where the fuck is all that money going? And that doesn't even count for all the federal dollars coming in for this. Billions of dollars from the federal government to do all this work, and it's not getting done. Beyond that, by padding their stats like this is not just normal, like cover your ass government bullshit. They are giving residents of California a false sense of security. Like if CalFire tells Casey, hey man, we just treated 1,000 acres around your area, are they letting him know that all they did was site prep? Are they going to tell people in Topanga? Are they going to tell people in Topanga, on the other side of Topanga State Park that hasn't burned yet? Are they going to tell them, oh, we just did 23,000 acres of treatment? And I mean, we're just counting the Palisades Fire because we were planning on treating that and then it burned in a wildfire. So technically we're going to count that. They're not telling you that. So what they're doing is they're lying to you and they're giving you a false sense of security. Like, oh, Gavin's on it. He's done 800,000 acres of treatment. This is the bullshit that they're talking about when they say treatment. This needs to be investigated by the Senate. I mean, this is a corrupt use of not just California taxpayer dollars, but federal taxpayer dollars. And they're giving people this false sense of security in California, and they're going to get wrecked. Because every time I talk about how egregious California is with prescribed fire, I always have these morons telling me, oh, they're doing burns all the time. No, they aren't. Dude, like it's like my entire life following this stuff. I know they're not doing it. And I'm showing you, this is how they lie. They're counting wildfire acres to pad their stats. This needs to be investigated by the Senate. And it is. Like, submitted all this to Senator Scott. Now, speaking of congressional investigations, SuperPav says Eaton Canyon has had a burn plan for a decade. Yeah, they have. It's that, dude, I've seen the same plan in the SOPA for like years now, for years. And so technically they can count that now because that whole expansion that they were going to do on those buffer zones around the foothills that they had in the SOPA for years. That's the status of planned activity. That all burned up in the Eaton fire. So they're going to count those acres. They're going to count the wildfire acres from the Eaton fire as RX fire acres. This needs to be investigated at a Senate level. Now, we used to have an appetite for congressional investigations. Adam Schiff slams Forest Service over delays in station fire report. This is from 2012. Representative Adam Schiff, who's now a senator, on Thursday again lashed out the U.S. Forest Service for its slow action on station fire reports, threatening to introduce legislation compelling the agency to turn over a study originally expected by the end of 2011. As we enter yet another fire season, the Forest Service delay poses additional risk to communities adjacent to the forest, Schiff said in a statement. Look how dogged he was. He was really concerned about vegetation endangering communities. Communities like the Palisades, maybe. Now all of a sudden, he doesn't give a fuck about congressional investigations. There's more. Again, around the station fire, lawmaker wants inquiry into wildfire response. It was day 2 of the station fire when incident commanders asked for air support to stop its spread. Their request for 3 tankers was canceled, and a helitanker arrived late, according to a review of records by the LA Times. Now, state and local officials want Congress to investigate whether the U.S. Forest Service decision to withhold air support was the right call. On Tuesday, Adam Schiff and Los Angeles County Supervisor Mike Antonovich called for a congressional investigation of the U.S. Forest Service and its response to the station fire. Where the fuck is this guy asking for an investigation into the response to the Palisades fire? Why all of a sudden has he soured on congressional investigations? I mean, look how passionate he was about getting to the bottom of this. Government let down these communities. Schiff from Burbank told the LA Times he will ask Congress to begin a probe next month to include review of the Forest Service decision to withhold water-dropping aircraft during the critical second day of the blaze. Antonovich wrote to Senator Dianne Feinstein, I would like to request a congressional investigation into the Forest Service failures to utilize water-dropping aircraft at the earliest stages of the station fire before it spread. Why aren't they doing that for the Palisades fire? And the LAFD admitting that they didn't order the appropriate amount of aircraft. Why is Senator Schiff not partnering up with Senator Rick Scott? All of a sudden, he doesn't think it's appropriate? Now, keep in mind, the station fire, I think, burned 89 homes. And there were 2 fatalities. There were firefighter fatalities. No civilians died in that fire. And here it says, before it spread, taking the lives of 2 firefighters burning over 160,000 acres. 160,000 acres. And we've talked about this before. You know, Gavin always makes a big deal about fires on federal lands. But when you have a big fire on federal lands, you usually don't get a lot of homes burning up. You can get a very small fire in the state responsibility area and nuke 7,000 homes. Right? Palisades fire was what, 23,000 acres? Here you have the station fire, 160,000 acres, no civilian fatalities, and they're saying 100 homes and structures. There were 89 homes that burned. 160,000 acres, only 89 homes. Now, look, any home loss is a tragedy, but look at that ratio versus when you have a fire in the state park, you get 7,000 structures, 7,000 homes destroyed on a 23,000 acre fire. This is why the state responsibility area, like where the Eaton fire started, and state parks are so much more critical. Okay? Going on. Quote, Congress really ought to investigate and determine if the right calls were made. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't want that. Why is he not partnering up with Senator Scott? I hope that we can have an oversight hearing and get to the bottom of this. Now, all of a sudden, he doesn't want to get to the bottom of it. Where the fuck is this guy? How many times has he been to the Palisades? When was the last time he was there? Bored Elon Musk, can you tell me? When was the last time Adam Schiff was fighting to get to the bottom of what caused the destruction of your town? Schiff told the Times he would propose that the House Appropriations Committee Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies conduct the inquiry and would like to participate in the hearing. Why doesn't he want to participate now? Is anyone asking these questions? The LA Times was so eager to report on this after the station fire. Where are they now? Who's putting any pressure on California's 2 senators who I've repeatedly called out for not doing a fucking thing to help their constituents? It feels like everybody just wants to make this go away. Everybody. Antonovich called for a congressional investigation into the false reports by the Forest Service and its failure to stop the fire before it spread. So we're only going to pick on the Forest Service? The LAFD is immune? The state parks, they're immune from investigation? Where the fuck are they? He wants a seat in Gavin's cabinet, Superpav says. That is 100% accurate. That's why Adam Schiff has completely abandoned these people. That's why he's completely abandoned, because Gavin Newsom has completely abandoned these people. He tried to do this little PR push. You guys see this? Just met with Jim Harris. He tried to sneak in through the back door at the Palisades. And of course, he wouldn't be caught dead having a picture taken 11 months after the fire with all the destruction behind him. So he went to a structure that didn't burn, Gladstone's. Just met with Jim Harris, manager of Gladstone's Malibu, an iconic seafood restaurant that was affected but not destroyed by the Palisades Fire and reopened outdoor dining in July. Well, I'm so good. This guy, man, this poor guy, he reopened in fucking July. How's Spencer Pratt doing? Is he close to reopening? This is who Gavin visits. Someone who really wasn't impacted by this fire. Their drive to get back on their feet reflects the resilient spirit of LA and our steady progress toward recovery. Now, what are they looking at? Who knows what they are looking at here? I mean, his building didn't burn down. It looks like they're looking at architectural plans. Why are they doing that? He didn't lose his structure. The reason why Gavin Newsom is meeting with this turncoat is because he's being a good little boy. And do you guys remember SB 79? You remember SB 79, which passed recently? Superpav's on it. He's always on it, dude. This motherfucker, he's on top of everything. I can't have any mystery in my live streams because Superpav is that dork in the front of the class who always raises his hand and has the answer. Board Elon Musk says, very valid point regarding Adam Schiff wanting a cabinet position in Gavin's imaginary future cabinet in the Cal CCP Special Economic Zone. Yeah, that's it. And right here, the only person Gavin would dare visit in the Palisades, because he knows that if he were to go actually into the Palisades, he would get booed out of there. And he had to sneak in here because this guy is being a good little boy. And he is going along with converting his lot into a bus depot to create a mass transit stop, which for any of you guys who remember our live streams about SB 79, which passed by one vote in California. This was this ridiculous legislation that Scott Wiener rammed through the back door, this attempt to shove high density housing into the Palisades. And what was it that they were telling you? Donia nailed it. High density housing. It's a transportation bill where when you have a mass transit stop within a half a mile, in a half-mile radius around a mass transit stop, you can force rezoning to include high density housing. There's a mandatory housing element in this transportation bill. And the predicate is having a mass transit stop. And the thing that they were saying to people like Spencer Pratt, who was sounding the alarm on SB 79, like, oh, dude, they're going to fucking jam high density housing into the Palisades. What did they always say? Palisades wouldn't qualify because it doesn't have a mass transit stop. Well, now, thanks to this asshole, it's about to. They are reviewing the plans to reimagine Gladstone's and build back better. And they are going to make a bus depot. So now everything within a half a mile of this spot on PCH, right near where my grandmother used to live at Edgewater Towers. Remember, you could see the facade of this building from her window, from her condo at Edgewater. And they're going to turn that into a mass transit stop. So now they will qualify for SB 79. Now, they've made a carve out for high fire severity areas, but are they going to reevaluate that now that all the fuels have burned off in the Palisades? Is it no longer a high fire severity area? This guy is a cog in the wheel for delivering Gavin Newsom and Scott Wiener's disgusting scheme to jam high density housing into the Palisades. And that's why he's here, because this motherfucker is being a good little boy and betraying his community. Steve Kerrigan says, backdoor and Scott Wiener really go together. Sad, but true. Another thing to touch on, this is really spooky. This is a first. 4 Sacramento firefighters injured from toxic fumes of EV battery fire. How many times have I told you about the dangers of all this stuff, right? And the danger of this whole climate change narrative is you get people investing in EVs and solar panels and not clearing their brush, right? The one thing that would prevent a fire, because they're convincing people, like Nat Geo is trying to convince you that if you buy an EV, you are somehow feeding the meter on wildfires because, well, if you just buy enough EVs, then you'll make the weather less angry and then the fires will stop. Okay, obviously that's bullshit. But the really sad part of this is because of this dynamic, because we're so focused on climate stuff and these fake solutions, like, EVs aren't going to solve climate change. You know what I mean? But because we're doing this, there's an opportunity cost where we're not actually mitigating the wildfire risk. And so then all of this stuff just ends up burning up in the inevitable wildfire. So many Teslas and solar panels burned up in the Palisades fire. And I told you guys, this is introducing lead, cadmium, beryllium, which is super, super toxic. And here we have a story. Sacramento firefighters encounter increased risk from electric battery fires, with 4 members being treated for exposure to toxic fumes from a Tesla crash last April. Now, the brand doesn't matter, just so you know. Whether it's a Tesla EV or a Cadillac EV, it's the components in the EV itself, right? The batteries. Moving on. So it's kind of a spooky story. 4 firefighters are being treated for exposure to a Tesla battery fire last April. A very low-lying white cloud, as it was described by those members, came across them. They immediately had a metallic taste in their mouth. This is vaporized heavy metals. One of the chemicals in those batteries, once it hits water, it turns to an acid. They further explained the dangers of electric vehicle fires. Once you split that series of batteries, that's when it becomes dangerous because it can short circuit and get into that thermal runaway and become very unpredictable on its own, he said. These EVs are something that is new to us, he said. We really need to look at what the best practice on fighting these fires and not becoming a victim ourselves. The 4 affected firefighters are undergoing experimental IV-infused therapy to remove heavy metals from their bloodstream and lungs, but it is unclear if there will be permanent damage. These guys might have permanent damage. Why? The fire was out. They took off their SCBAs and they were in the overhaul phase. And then I guess something poofed out. This white cloud that seemed relatively innocuous, but then they had this metallic taste in their mouth as they were sucking in heavy metals, aerosolized heavy metals. Now, all of the firefighters and, the civilians on the Palisades fire were breathing this stuff in. There was, remember, one of the fellas on Texas Canyon Hotshots who, they were down in the urban interface during the Eden fire, and he got turbo cancer. This beryllium poisoning is really bad. It's really bad. And it's off-gassing from the homes that are still standing, by the way. So a lot of the people whose homes survived, they actually can't live in them. So all of these green products are like turning these places into a Superfund site. Someone's pointed out Moss Landing battery storage fire in the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. That's right. You guys remember that massive, massive fire at the Moss Landing? That was Sandrine, NorCal. That one was really bad. There's going to be more of this, right, as this becomes more prevalent. And the thing is, like, the dangers and the EV technology is outpacing their response to this. Clearly, they have to adapt their protocols because this is really, really bad. Daniel Firecopter says, electric vehicles will just make everything worse once they catch on fire. The hazards from the toxic fumes will just go lingering into the air. Yeah, that's the big concern. Now, look, we own an EV, not because I have some illusion that we're saving the planet with it. It's just a really cool car. We have a Cadillac Lyriq. The thing's awesome. I love that car. My vehicle is a manual transmission Jeep. I'm going to drive it till it's dead. That's the best thing you can do for the environment, by the way, is just drive your vehicle till it's dead. Because it's the manufacture of these new vehicles. It's actually really bad. But all that said, man, this is my whole point. This whole narrative that we're going to save the world with these esoteric technologies, it's a fantasy. It's not real. It's not to say that the climate isn't changing. It is. It's just I think the risks of it are very marginal. I don't think it's worth having any panic over. This stuff is scary. This stuff is scary. And firefighters who are responding to Palisades and Eden, they have elevated levels of mercury and lead in their blood. And we're seeing permanent damage on these guys. And it's changing their lives for the worse. So we need to be thinking about this stuff. I feel like with a lot of things, like with these EVs and with AI, we're kind of diving too headlong into it, and it's really bad. I don't like it. So anyway, okay, there's just one last thing. Rob Reiner. I love Rob Reiner. I always have. For my money, Stand By Me was his best film. And he's had Princess Bride, When Harry Met Sally. He's had so many amazing films. Such a talented director, such a funny guy. This is Spinal Tap was amazing. And he was murdered by his own son. He and his wife were murdered by his son. They had their throats slit. It's atrocious. And I'm still sort of in shock from the whole thing. Rob Reiner, obviously politics gets dragged into this because, like so many people in Hollywood, politics has become like their main bread and butter. It's just making movies. It's like they're spending more time, on their soapbox talking politics and ranting and raving. And, a lot like the climate stuff, I feel like everybody's like political ramblings, they're just way too histrionic. At the end of the day, like all the people who hate President Trump, it's like, I mean, is he really, really impacting your life? Like, honestly, the irony is that someone like Gavin Newsom has a really significant impact on the lives of a lot of people in Hollywood because their homes all burned down because of his bad policies, right? So that's someone who they largely vote for and support, who has a much more direct impact on their lives. Whereas, the impact in terms of federal government is oftentimes, it's a lot more like esoteric. It's hard to really, crystallize that. But politics has ruined everybody's fucking brains. Politics has ruined and I mean everybody. And we've talked about this a lot. And we've gotten to a point where it's like people feel this need that they got to put some kind of a political disclaimer when somebody dies, especially in such a tragic and horrific, traumatic way. Like, I have to put a disclaimer on there like, look, I didn't like the man's politics. And that might seem innocent enough, right? I didn't like the man's politics. He was my political nemesis, but nobody deserves this. You guys understand, you don't need to say that first part. You don't need to say that first part. You can just be sad. You can just show empathy. And you can simply do what's appropriate when somebody is murdered or somebody dies in a tragic way. The appropriate thing to do is you eulogize them and you pray for the repose of their soul. That's it. So when I talk about Rob Reiner, I talk about what I loved about him and all that he contributed to culture. I don't need to tell you how I feel about his politics. I can just say, I'm really sad. I'm really sad. And, Donald Trump had this response that I was genuinely shocked by. I read that first line, I thought it was going to be good. And then, he shit all over him. He shit all over this guy who was just murdered by his own son. And I understand that, Rob said a lot of, really, really rough things to the president. Politics is a dirty business, and some people are trying to defend what the president said. And, he tried to put some white out on it by saying, may Rob and Michelle rest in peace. Okay. If it had just been the first two lines, it would have been perfect. And, I've seen the president when Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, it was certainly his nemesis, but he was actually very compassionate and measured, and he had said some very nice things about her, and that was it. So I know he knows how to handle this. I don't know what the fuck happened. I really don't. But this is unhinged. And I'm so sick of us getting to this point. And the thing is, Gavin Newsom reposted this, and you guys know how much I hate Gavin Newsom. You guys know it. I say it all the time. If you're making Gavin Newsom look like the better man, you fucked up. You fucked up. And, I want to tell you guys a story. When Spencer and I went to DC, we were in DC September 9th, 10th, and 11th of this year. And those of you will remember that something happened on September 10th. Spencer and I, we were in a meeting. We were in an interagency meeting. We were doing the rounds, met with senators, we met with HUD, we met with cabinet members. And we were in the middle of a meeting with a lot of different agencies there, a lot. I won't name all of them, but these are people who are in the president's cabinet. And we were in the middle of this meeting when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck. And I see people trying to defend this. Rob Reiner was nasty to President Trump. Have you seen Reiner's tweets about Trump? I have. Let me tell you something else that I've seen. I've seen Rob Reiner, getting his hair cut by his daughter and wearing a cap that she had knitted for him and smiling. And I look at that man and I see an old Jewish man, an old Jewish director who loves his family, who was too soft on his son because he's just an old Jewish guy from Southern California. And I look at him and I see my dad. Now, my dad and I disagree a lot on politics, a lot, okay? But when I see Rob Reiner, I see my dad, a sweet old Jewish man who is a little histrionic with his politics. The idea that I should be celebrating when I see my dad getting stabbed in the neck, because that's what I see when I look at Rob. Yes, I've seen his unhinged tweets. Yes, they're really nasty. I don't care. Politics has ruined your fucking brains, people. You're just a fucking human being. Nothing is gained by speaking ill of the dead. Nothing is gained. But you lose the respect of so many people when you talk like this. Now, when Spencer and I were in DC, we were in a meeting when Charlie Kirk got shot in the neck. A lot of the people in that room were very good friends with Charlie. And I remember I got a text message and it was an image of Charlie seized up. He had just been shot. And everybody's phone started going off and somebody pulled up the video and we saw it. I'm sure a lot of you have seen that video. It's like the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life. It was very surreal to be in a room of all the people who were really good friends with Charlie. They'd been working with him for years. And, this is the president's cabinet, right? These are all people who interfaced with him and he helped get them to where they were and helped run his organization with him. They stopped the meeting, said a prayer, even though it was very obvious that there was not a survivable wound. They prayed that he would make it through. And we had multiple meetings that day, and every building that we went into, it reminded me of 9/11. Everyone was standing up, pale white, watching the TV in, the reception area or whatever, in absolute shell shock. And what we saw over the next days and weeks was we saw huge swaths of people celebrating his death. And it was the most disgusting and disheartening thing that I've ever seen in my life. And I just don't understand where we're at, where we think that political battles somehow are worth abandoning our morality and our human fucking decency. Yes, I've seen his fucking tweets. I don't give a shit. He's a fucking human being with a family. Charlie Kirk is a human being with a fucking family. I don't care how much his words triggered you. You don't dance on their grave. So let me put it really simply one more time. When somebody dies in a horrific manner, this is what you do. You eulogize them and you pray for the repose of their soul. You don't have to do anything else. You don't have to show his fucking tweets. Who cares about his tweets? The man is dead. Have some fucking decency, people. Now, I've been on here hammering Gavin Newsom for what he did. He is responsible for the death of 12 people in the Palisades directly. He's responsible for the loss of thousands of homes and conceding chunks of the most precious real estate in the country to Chinese investors. He's legitimately instigating a foreign takeover of my hometown. Like every single Passover for my entire life is at the corner of Sunset and PCH. Every Thanksgiving. And now it's going to be sold off to foreign buyers because of Gavin fucking Newsom. And I have spent so much time trying to expose this guy. And now, because of this stupid messaging, this inexplicable outburst from the president, Gavin Newsom now gets the news cycle. And he gets to be the better man. There are so many people in the Palisades who worked with Rob Reiner, who are pissed at Gavin Newsom and want the president's support to help them in the Palisades. And they're now like, dude, fuck this guy. Because they loved Rob. And normal people like me, we can separate the politics from the person in the same way that I can do that with my family. None of my family came with me to Tennessee. You can imagine some of the disagreements we probably have. But when I see Rob Reiner, I see my dad. And I think because maybe I can internalize that, I see the humanity in that man, and I don't care how cruel he might have been over fucking texts and tweets. You guys need to grow the fuck up, because politics has just melted your fucking brains. Daniel Firecopter says people shouldn't be celebrating the death of a human being because of their political views. Charlie Kirk and Rob Reiner had families with kids, 100%. And to be fair, Rob Reiner had actually a very, very compassionate reaction. I think it was on CNN. So of course he's on CNN, right? But when Charlie Kirk died, he did not do any of this rigmarole. Now, Scott Wiener, on the other hand, called Charlie Kirk a fascist. Now, Scott Wiener's trying to fucking moralize over this Donald Trump thing. And Donald Trump deserves criticism for this, period. Like, all you guys trying to defend it, it's like, guys, just take the fucking L. This is really stupid. This is really fucking stupid. This is not helpful. And again, this gives Gavin Newsom oxygen to say this guy's a fucking moron. And the thing is, I can't defend that. I can't argue that. This is why it's important to be a decent person. Like, if you're concerned just about like political battles, this is why you need to be a decent person. Now, I think you should be a decent person because it's what God commands of us. But if you can't bring yourself to do that, and you feel this impulse to dance on the grave of someone who's just murdered, then at least through the cynical lens of political gamesmanship and Machiavellian strategy, understand that when you debase yourself like this, you give power to your political enemies. You have to maintain the moral high ground, and you have to tell the truth. And that's what I've done with this entire process of exposing the Palisades Fire. I've told the fucking truth. Because if people catch me in a lie, if people catch me embellishing, we lose all that ground. This is an uphill battle for the Palisades. It is an uphill battle for them to win their lawsuit. And by the grace of God, we're this fucking close to getting some justice for this fire. And every one of these missteps, all of these stupid impulses to lie, to embellish, to put conspiracy theories out there, it just fucks the entire thing. It's like we take 2 steps forward and then slide 10 steps back. So if all you can think about is political strategy and winning the fight and, we're generals on the battlefield and whatever fucking LARPing that you want to do, then at least understand that you need to act like a moral person if you want to convince people that you're worth listening to and to join your side. Anyway, sorry for that, but I'm sick. I'm sick of this. I was so sickened to see people celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, and thank God, Donald Trump's kind of the outlier here. Everybody that I've seen who are, political enemies with Rob Reiner, have largely been very gracious and universally disgusted by this stuff. We can't pretend to be mad at like when Gavin Newsom was talking shit about Elon's son, right? Who's pretending to be a female. You can't pretend like you're offended by what Gavin Newsom said if you're going to defend this. You have to have some fucking integrity. I intend to maintain my integrity, and that's why I will call out anybody who acts like an asshole. As I've said over and over, my takes on Gavin Newsom are not political. And I don't care if you put up Kamala Harris. Go ahead, let her be president. I really don't give a shit. My politics are for me. They're not for you guys. I only pick on Gavin Newsom because I see that man as being uniquely evil. But all that said, if something bad were to ever happen to him, you better believe I would shut my fucking mouth. And I would pray for his soul. So remember, in this dystopian world of AI and people dancing on each other's fucking graves, the only way to prove you're human is to do it live and to pray for the souls of people who meet their end. Good night.